the college football playoff and how quickly the format is changing and these debates currently going on between coaches and league commissioners in terms of how to create this playoff format in a way that makes sense. Now, let me just start by sharing some personal feelings on this, and then I'll get into what some of the talking heads as well as what some of the coaches are saying about this. I have a very, very complicated relationship with the college football playoff as a fan. For one thing, I always wanted a college football playoff, and I think we should have a college football playoff. From a business perspective, it's undeniably the right move. More television, more opportunities to earn revenue for these schools and for these leagues. So I'm all about the college football playoff from a business perspective. I did not like the BCS system. I know there's a little bit of nostalgia driven. Let's just go back to the BCS talk amongst certain podcast hosts or fans. I think that's horrible, especially with how biased we are in this era towards SEC and Big Ten teams. The BCS would be a death nail for the Big 12, who we cover and root for here, for the ACC, maybe for other schools in other places. So I'm not in favor of going back to a BCS system or anything that only allows two teams to compete for a national championship. I like the college football playoff. I liked the 4-team playoff format. I think now that we only have 4 power conferences in college football, it almost would make sense to go back to 4 teams in a way, right? It was a little complicated when you had 5 power leagues as well as Notre Dame all kind of competing for those 4 spots. But I thought the 4-team playoff mostly gave us interesting matchups and a good game, especially in the national championship. I was in favor of moving to an 8-team playoff. And I think if I could go back in time and try to convince anyone of anything, I still think an 8-team playoff might be what would be the ideal solution in my mind. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But we did just have the first year of the 12-team playoff this past year. And what we saw, let's just be honest about what that looked like, is the first round had a lot of not very close football games, right? Despite the fact that on this show, I said I thought SMU could compete with Penn State. That game was a disaster for SMU. Despite the fact that I was rooting for Indiana to make a storybook run, they got beat pretty soundly by in-state rival Notre Dame. And that was the closest first round game. The first round did not provide us with a lot of great football. Second round on, we got a lot of good football. We got some really fun matchups. Second round onward, Arizona State, Texas was notably a phenomenal football game. Maybe the best one of the postseason there in that second round. But I am so disheartened by the fact that we've had 1 year of the 12-team format, and we've already decided next year in 2026 that we are going to 16 teams. I don't think, here's what it comes down to for me. I don't think when we get to December, there are 16 teams in America with a legitimate claim that they should be number 1. I don't think in any given college football season you could pick, there are 16 teams that could legitimately have an argument to say, no, actually, we are the champion and we deserve to compete for the crown and the trophy of a champion. So, for instance, last year, I think it's a picture-perfect example. Alabama is kind of that first team out of the playoff last year, and there's obviously been a big stink raised by certain individuals about that, about Alabama missing the playoff over Clemson, who won their conference, or over SMU, or over Indiana, right? Bottom line is, Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and a 6-win Oklahoma team. I can believe they were the 13th or 14th best team in the country last season. That ranking's fine, but they didn't deserve to compete for a national championship. And when we go to the 16-team format, ultimately, that's the kind of team that's going to get in. A 3 or 4 loss SEC team that has 2 losses that are inexplicable on their resume. Ole Miss would have gotten in a 16-team format last season. They had 2 losses that were inexplicable. And so I really struggle as a fan to embrace a 16-team format altogether. I wish we'd leave it at 12. I wish we'd have 8. I think if you took Power 4 champions and 3 or 4 at large, 8-team playoff, to me, that lets everyone who maybe has a legitimate claim at number 1 to compete, and it doesn't overinflate the product. But with this 16-team format, we're getting it, whether I like it or not. And so let's talk about the 2 models that are being debated right now. The 2 models that are being debated amongst league commissioners, amongst coaches, amongst school presidents, amongst media types like us are sorry, I just lost my place on my phone. The 4-4-2-2-1-3 model, which I'll explain in a second, or the 5+11 model. So to put it simply, the 5+11 model would be the same as the 12-team model currently, with more at-large bids. Your 4 power champions get an automatic bid, and your highest ranked champion from a group of 5 conference would get in. That's the current format with 12 teams. And then you'd have 11 at-large bids that the committee could give to anyone at their discretion. Brett Yormark, commissioner of the Big 12, has come out strongly in favor of the 5+11 model. I think he sees that as potentially some seasons actually offering more opportunity to a conference like the Big 12 if they have multiple teams who are really strong, versus, if we give more auto bids to the SEC or to the Big 10, that actually almost kind of puts like in writing or in stone this idea that the Big 12 is an inferior conference. Whereas with a 5+11 model, we could shift 5 years from now with our perceptions based on what's on the field, and more Big 12 teams would have an opportunity. The 4-4-2-2-1-3 model is something that a lot of Big 10 and SEC commissioners, coaches are advocating for. This is how that would work. In that model, 4 SEC teams get auto bids. 4 Big 10 schools get auto bids. You'd get 2 auto bids for the Big 12 and for the ACC. I think the one would be the highest ranked group of 5 champion still. Yeah. That's what it says. And then Notre Dame would automatically get one of the at-large bids depending on their ranking. And then you'd have 2 at-large bids or 3 if it's not Notre Dame. So it's very complicated. But what it actually sets up as a precedent, if you go with that model, is that the SEC and the Big 10 will always get 4 teams, and the Big 12 and the ACC will always get 2 teams. And you're essentially codifying this bias or this idea that the SEC and the Big 10 will always have better football. And I can see why Big 12 fans would not like that. Joel Klatt, on the other hand, who Pete and I both respect a lot as one of the better college football analysts working today, has come out last week and said the Big 12 should be strongly opposed to the 5+11 model, because if you put more power in the hands of a committee, he sees it going the other way. He said that would actually be the death of the Big 12 in the college football playoff, because the committee could put 5, 6 SEC schools in, whereas with the 4-4-2-2-1-3, God, that's so annoying to say out loud, Zach. The Big 12 is guaranteed your 2 spots, right? Again, I do not like this, because I think if you lose your conference championship, I don't want to see you in the college football playoff. Granted, we just had a wonderful national championship run from Ohio State, who did not qualify for their conference championship game. So it's kind of a crazy state of affairs. But here's the last thing I want to say about it from an outside perspective, and I'll bring Zach into dialogue about it a little bit before we take a break. Texas Tech's Joey McGuire came out yesterday and made a strong statement against conference bias. And he said, essentially, we have to stop pretending like we know for sure that the SEC and the Big 10 are better, or this school or that school plays better football. We should settle this on the field, he says. And I think that's really idealistic and nice of him to say. He also said, if you win your conference, you should be in, and then we should determine the 11 best schools other than that on the field. I think both of these models attempt to do that, right? Whether you want more auto bids for the SEC or you want more at-large bids. I think both of those are striving to say who is best on the field to get into this playoff. One has more subjectivity to it. One has more objectivity to it. But again, it kind of codifies this SEC superiority thing and doesn't quite get to maybe what Joey McGuire would want. Here's what I would say to Joey McGuire and to Big 12 fans. If we're going to settle this on the field, and we're going to talk about this in segment 2, Big 12 has to play non-conference games against the SEC and the Big 10. You have to play non-conference games. You have to win them, right? You just have to. Couple schools have a good opportunity to do that this fall, by the way. And you have to start winning these playoff games. The Big 12, regardless of model, is never going to have more schools in the playoff if they lose to the SEC every time they're in the playoff. Now, Arizona State had a great showing against Texas. They did not win that football game, but they were one play away at multiple given points from winning that football game against Texas. Big 12's got to win a playoff game this year. You have to. And it could be that maybe the vote is we go to this 4-4-2-2-1-3 model, but the Big 12 in any given year could still get 3 or 4 teams in if they start competing and showing out against the SEC in the playoff. If they start winning more of these non-conference games against big teams. If they have an Arizona State or an Iowa State or a Baylor get to a national championship game, right? Then I think we can start having more conversations about conferences proving it on the field. It's really difficult right now, though, when the Big 12 has not had a team able to quite break through that glass ceiling in a long time. Zach, I just rambled on way too long because I care about this. It matters to me. I get mad about conference biases. I don't like 16 teams competing for a national championship. Quickly, because we got a lot to get to today. Your thoughts on any of that?
No, I am, kind of in agreement with you. I don't like the bias in a way of where it just feels like, automatically like, and I know that sometimes that's how you're going to get, obviously, everybody on board is the SEC wants as many spots as they can have. The Big 10 wants as many spots as they can have. But I like opening it up to the 16 best teams more so than just what conference you play for. But
so you would prefer the 5-11 model?
I think I would prefer the 5-11 model.
So you trust a committee to maybe be more fair about their conference bias rather than codifying the conference bias.
So I'm one of those guys. You talked about the BCS at the very beginning of all this, and I'm not a full on, let's bring the BCS back.
Let's go back to 2 teams.
I'm not. My thing is I think that you can mix both systems together to find something that works really well. And what I'm saying is obviously you have the conference champs or the 5 teams there that you don't have to worry about. The other 11, what you do is you get together as that human committee. And honestly, you can include all the teams in Division I football if you want to. And y'all figure out this is the rubric that we all agree upon that we are ranking, people's performances at. And then we're developed enough with programming to where you can build a program to rank that out for you.
Yeah.
Now, and will there be
strength of schedule, strength of record?
You have, and you tell we want it to, rank this higher than this. We want it to, maybe it goes in and even it'd be tough to do it. Assigns point values to teams. It's like there's all things you could do, but you could create a system.
We have enough AI and models and stuff. Exactly. We can do anything. Yeah.
So, and there could have hiccups, but
you will.
You will. But what I see happening more than is that it gives you more of what you're wanting, but that's not more of what you want, because at the end of the day, the SEC wants the most teams they can have in the playoffs. The Big 10 wants the most teams they have in the playoffs, not the most fairest amount of teams. So it doesn't matter there. We're never going to go back to a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost wish in Scotty's dream world, I wish some of these spots, I wish we had one more that was guaranteed to a small school. Yeah. Like I almost wish we had 2. Like Boise State and maybe last season Army.
But see, I think that's what the 11 would do, because it depends. I feel like the rubrics, it seems like it changes every year too. Yeah. But it changes depending on the team that it affects. It feels like most of the time.
or who's on the committee.
That too. Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's like you take the human element out of, you're going to have that regardless of it's a human element. Like even if somebody goes in, if I go in there and I'm like, I have no bias whatsoever, and I have no affiliation with any team, but I've watched a lot of Big 12 football. Naturally, just over time, I feel like I would just kind of lean more towards that way, even without knowing. Like, I think there's things that the human element adds to it. Not that it's like we haven't had like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so's left out of the playoff. We haven't had anything like that yet.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's a better way to do it to where you can have it match what you're looking for and take out that team should be in. Well, that team should be in. I guess ultimately it doesn't matter because with 16 teams, they should beat each other and win out, I guess, in the end. But
again, I don't like having 16 teams in this thing. If you can't prove that you're in the top 16 definitively, why should you have the opportunity to prove you're a national champion? So,
absolutely.
And I felt that way about Alabama last year. Like, you couldn't even definitively prove you're top 12. I don't need you to say you should have the right to compete for a championship. So ultimately, that's how I feel about it either way. I think I'm with you. I think a 5+11, like, we trust. And people want to draw this parallel and say we shouldn't. I think we should. We trust a committee every year to do March Madness. That's a way harder job, by the way.
Oh.
You're looking at 4 times as many schools. You're looking at tons of parity between conferences and leagues and who's this and who's that. You're valuing so many things, and you've got to pick 68 teams that get to compete for this thing. And I think
I'm still a little salty and went to 68, but yeah.
And most years, there's 2 or 3 schools that are like, man, we really thought we earned it. That sucks. But most years we look at that committee and say, yeah, they did a pretty good job. Well, they do a pretty good job.
I would argue one more thing, though, too. And I've been hoping so much that college football never gets to that point of where it feels like the college basketball tournament. 64 to me felt like it was perfect where it is at, and I can deal with 68. And I think I've even heard talks of them wanting to expand more, but you don't, because that argument there of like, oh, Mount St. Mary's didn't get in. You can have those arguments, but those are, and I'm not trying to diss Mount St. Mary's, those aren't the teams that's going to win that national championship.
Right.
Though those are teams that are fighting just to like be in there, and for them, making an appearance is big. Like, I get why you like argue, but it feels like this is different for the college football playoff.
Yeah.
The teams that are up there aren't like, oh, we want those big ESPN games. Like, for the most part, unless you're somebody like a Boise, you're probably nationally televised all the time.
Yep.
So it's a different kind of thing, I would think. And it's bear the truth, ask the question. And I think we can kind of talk about it here and attest to it just real quick of why that these conferences want more spots. This is more money. And I think that's what it is.
Money's a huge part of it.
And it's also then just exposure. They want, when you think of college football, you think of the SEC. They've been trying to do that forever. The more 5 teams, but I think it's also. Go ahead. I cut you off.
I just with both the Big Ten and the SEC, they are trying to permanently and forever for the next 100 years solidify themselves as superior. If you have 4 guaranteed teams versus a Big 12 with 2, you can recruit better kids out there. You can continue to build up programs more quickly. Like, I mean, just think about it. Like, if you're the best player in the state of Texas, you can go play for a Texas Tech, a Baylor, an Oklahoma State. Man, we get 2 teams in the playoff. You got a good shot to play in the playoff. Mm-hmm. You can go play for Bama, A&M, LSU, Tennessee, and Texas, whoever. And, if we're in the top 4 in our league, we get to play for a national championship. Like, yes, that's going to bring better players. Like, it just continues their growth as quality football conferences. It codifies that. Whereas, and I still think in a 5+11 model, you'd have 4 SEC teams get in most years. Like Alabama and Ole Miss both would have gotten in this past season had we had that model. But that doesn't mean it's the best model. No. I'm not saying it is. I don't know if we have one that it is. Here's the thing, the one, if that made any sense. The whole Notre Dame thing, I know we don't have time to get into that, but that's a thing all in itself that I've always just questioned with college football. Like, I get that here it is in my lifetime, or in our lifetime, Notre Dame has never been that program. Yeah. They've had a couple flashes.
They have. I shouldn't say never been. You're right.
Last season. They also had Manti Te'o. That team played Alabama for a national championship. But it's not the same that I feel like it used to be, of where it would warrant of like, we have to make room for Notre Dame as that independent. It's not they're the one school on national TV every week that everyone in the country loves.
And so it always feels more of like a head scratcher now when those things pop up. Yeah. And it does make Notre Dame just kind of look.
Yeah.
I mean, I think from what I've read is them doing this too. It also gives them less of a reason to like join a conference then too, if they're still going to get the.
Yeah. If it's like, if your ranking's good enough, you're automatically in. Why would they? Yeah,
exactly.